Hi everyone, welcome to I Just React and Review. My name is Ashmita and I hope you all are doing well. And right now I will be briefly sharing my thoughts on the latest Amazon Prime Malayalam movie release, Bhramam, starring Prithviraj in the lead role. Now a lot of us have been a bit skeptical about this film in the sense that after a long time there was a remake film being made in the Malayalam industry, and that too of a film which is considered to be one of the finest Hindi thriller films, Andhadhun. I also mentioned this in my trailer reaction of Bhramam, is that the biggest advantage that Andhadhun had was the shock value that was delivered throughout the narration of the film. And unfortunately for the audiences who have already watched Andhadhun, of course Bhramam had this disadvantage that it would not be able to deliver that shock value. So yeah, it is actually difficult to remake a film like this which totally depends on twists and turns. And I think the makers of Bhramam realized this. So what they did was that they took the original story, but the treatment of the story was completely different. And contrary to the popular belief and the public opinion that I've seen right now, even though I absolutely love the original one, this movie is not that bad. Now, as the original storyline has not been tampered with much, I obviously knew the sequence of events and what is going to happen in the scenes eventually. So of course the biggest disadvantage that this movie had for me is that I knew the story. But to be completely fair to this film, I would say that it could somewhat hold its own ground, and I know how our brains work is that we will always compare a remake to the original source. That happens automatically. Bhramam as a movie, I would say, is much more lighter on its narrative. There is not an uncomfortable undertone attached to this film, unlike Andhadhun, which was much darker, grittier and edgier. Bhramam on the other hand is much more like a fun thriller kind of ride. In fact, it is more comical in its storytelling and direction. The way the story has been sort of repackaged and delivered to the audience, it is not supposed to make you sit on the edge of your seat and bite your nails off thinking, oh my god, what is going to happen next? That's not the, end goal of this movie. This is much more like a family thriller watch film. That's the vibe I got from it. Now, while talking about the overall narrative of the film and specifically the characters, I would say that the characters are, well, to put it very nicely, very shallow and one-dimensional. If one is to watch Bhramam as a standalone original film and not a remake, then considering the story, the character motivations and their actions might seem kiddish. And this very specifically goes for the lead, Ray Matthews. Him pretending to be blind just because he's able to extract a cheap rent in a prime location and actually have an edge over a musical competition seems very lackluster. For me, honestly, it did not feel like Ray Matthews actually has this incredible passion for music that he would go to any lengths to ensure that he wins the competition and moves to Europe. I just did not feel that. In fact, it felt more like a cheap shortcut trick that he's trying to use to have an edge over the other participants. It just didn't feel like he's doing this to fuel his passion for music and push himself as an artist. No, it doesn't feel like that at all. As the story progresses and we see his arc, we realize that yes, this guy actually has a moral compass which sort of works in this kind of narrative where the anti-hero develops a moral compass and becomes the hero and does the right thing at the end. So yes, for like a massy commercial film, this kind of arc and narrative works. Rest of the characters are also written in a way to fit the much more light-hearted storytelling tone of this movie. The original material has a lot of subtext in its narration where we are trying to understand as an audience that how the human mind works and you really cannot trust anybody and people switching sides and all of that. There are so many layers to the storyline in the original material, but that has really been kept aside for this particular remake. Also, as I mentioned before, that our brain automatically starts comparing the remake with the original source material. So if somebody who has watched Andhadhun is watching this movie and comparing it constantly, you're bound to get disappointed. I'm telling you this beforehand. Then you're probably going to say that Bhramam is the worst remake ever made. But if you just change the perspective and your eye, yes, pun intended, while watching this film, I'm telling you, it's not as bad. Now, coming back to the character sketches, Unni Mukundan's character as the police officer Dinesh is actually there to make you laugh. Unlike the original where the police officer was so freaking intimidating and scary, I didn't feel that here. In fact, Dinesh as a character is an insecure, scared police officer whose only power is to flex his muscular body because he's so much into fitness. Mamta Mohandas's character Simi is also not written to intimidate you. In fact, she is the textbook villain that we see in a Masi film. I mean, she has those typical cunning eyes, that typical cunning smile while delivering the dialogues. The weakest character for me was that of Rashi Khanna. I mean, I was pretty indifferent to her. I did not really care about her. I did not care about her chemistry with Prithvi Raj. It just felt like, okay, she's just there. Even if she was not part of the storyline, it would have been just fine with me. Another interesting thing that I found about Bhramam was the way the cinematography and the set design was done. I always believe that technical aspects like cinematography or sound design or set design sets the tone and mood of the film. And here, if you see the cinematography particularly, the color scheme is pretty bright. When you're watching this film, you will encounter so many bright colors that it will register in your brain as a light-hearted watch. Just to give a small example, the way Prithvi Raj's entire apartment has been captured, I mean, it's so beautifully and aesthetically pleasing to your eyes. You will feel that, oh my god, wow, it's actually so beautiful. And it'll get registered in your head that, oh, he's just paying 200 rupees rent for this amazing place. And the way the camera is panning to the characters or to the surroundings, it is not going to give you a suspense feeling. The structure with which the scenes play out, the shock value gets completely taken away from it. I feel that's the conscious choice the director took to shift the tone of the film. Once again, like I said before, you just have to change your perspective a little to actually enjoy this film. But the one thing which truly disappointed me was the music. And I say this with a very heavy heart because Jakes Bijoy is absolutely one of my favorite composers in the Malayalam film industry, and I cannot believe this is the same guy who gave the score for Kuruthi, which was such a great score. I couldn't believe that he has done the composition for this song because the magic, that spark, something was missing, you know. The songs are really forgettable and even the score is not that captivating, and I was really disappointed with the score. Now coming to the performances, I think for me Rashi Khanna was the weakest and Prithvi Raj's performance was the strongest. So if I really had to rank the performances like from weakest to strongest, I would go Rashi Khanna, then it would be Unni Mukundan, then Mamta Mohandas, and then Prithvi Raj. But of course, in all honesty, I would say that this is not his best performance. Of all the performances that I've watched, I feel that Kuruthi, what he did in Kuruthi, was far superior than what he did in Bhramam. I felt that even though he gave a good performance, in some of the scenes he really shined, but that Prithvi Raj magic, something, I think 1 or 2%, something was missing out. Maybe it's just me, but I felt that he did not immerse himself completely into the character. Mamta Mohandas honestly did her best, and I do not want to compare her with Tabu's acting because Tabu's character was much darker. Here she was much cunning and, you know, she was like the typical textbook villain, and the way she has delivered her role, I think she was fantastic. Unni Mukundan's scenes actually made me laugh, and I say this with the best intent because I truly believe that his character was not supposed to intimidate us, but it was there for comic relief. So he had some scenes where I actually laughed out loud. Now, to give the final verdict, is this a bad remake? I personally would say no, it is not, because it's not even like a question of comparison here, because the way Andhadhund is, the kind of movie Andhadhund is and the kind of movie Bhramam is, the treatment is very different for these two movies, even though the storyline is exactly the same, and I respect the makers for that. They really did not tamper a lot with the storyline, but they completely shifted the tone of this film. And yes, I definitely would be applauding the makers for that, because you know, it's a difficult film to remake, honestly, from my perspective. So I would say that yes, they did justice to the original story because they did not tamper with it, and they made a decent remake. I would say that yes, it is forgettable. I would not, you know, rewatch it. I have watched Andhadhund like 3-4 times. Even though I know the entire storyline, it still gives me the chills. It still gives me the chills. But this movie is just a one-time watch. You can just watch it, enjoy it, and then forget about it. So yes, I wouldn't like bash it left, right, and center saying that, oh, this is like the worst remake made. I have seen worse remakes made. Come on, guys, this is not as bad. So yes, that was my opinion. You can definitely share yours in the comments below. And those were my thoughts on the latest film Bhramam starring Prithvi Raj. I definitely want to read your thoughts in the comments below, so do share. And I will be signing off now from this video, and I'll see you soon on my next video. Bye bye.